Welcome to Seasons. I'm Marisol Castro.
And I'm Chef Plum.
Chef, it's that time of the month where
We're live. I can see you. You're right in front of me. I love it.
And your hair looks fantastic.
It's kind of a mess right now, but more importantly, your nails are not a mess. They're phenomenal.
Thank you. Listeners, for those of you who want to walk into our crazy, welcome. Chef and I have been doing this for a year, and we do it virtually, so when we get to see each other face to face, it's like a big party.
We get excited about nail polish.
And hair color.
That's right.
We are live from Gateway Community College in New Haven, and we're talking about diners.
Wow.
Diner culture.
What a community. Like, what a whole... When we started diving deep into this, I had no idea the rabbit hole we were going to start going down.
By the way, speaking of rabbit hole, did you know, for example, that diners were invented just a stone's throw away in Rhode Island in the late 1800s?
Wow.
I did not know that until our producers told us that.
That's pretty, I mean, it's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I had no idea. And not only that, I think they were for men only.
Well, that is a tragedy.
I agree. Completely. But coming up a little bit later in the show, we'll talk to Brian O'Rourke. He's the chef and owner of O'Rourke's Diner in Middletown, about local diner history and specifically the history of O'Rourke's, which began back in 1941.
In Middletown, Connecticut, you know I like to give a shout out to my alma mater, Wesleyan,
Do it
whenever
up.
I can.
Absolutely.
I may or may not have spent a hungover morning at O'Rourke's after a rugby match and then a party of sorts.
Plead the fifth.
Maybe not. And when you think of diners, you don't immediately think of poetry, but we are going to introduce you to a Hartford poet who wrote hundreds of poems in diners across the state, and that's actually very cool.
It was really super cool. But before we get into the history of diners and what makes diners such special places, we want to hear from you. Do you have a diner story or something you love to get from a diner or want to shout out one of your favorite diners? Give us a call. 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. We're interested in hearing about your favorite diners and, just tell Marisol, tell all of us your diner story, your favorite food. We can't wait to hear it.
Yes, because we know not all diners are known for their cuisine, and I'm not trying to offend any diner owners, but sometimes life-changing things happen in diners.
And life-changing things meaning the food, but also meaning crazy events. Maybe you're a server at a diner and you've seen some amazing things happen at work.
Maybe you've seen a proposal.
Or two or three.
Or you've seen a gaggle of people come in after prom.
How many people are in a gaggle?
I have no idea, but let's get to our guest, shall we? Because he's probably like, what have I just gotten myself into? Our guest for the hour is local author Mike Urban. He's written about diners for Yankee Magazine. He's also the author of the New England Diner Cookbook. Mike, welcome to Season. Thanks for joining us.
Real happy to be here. Thanks for having me out. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now that you too have been brought into the fold of the Season's crazy.
So, Mike, before we get into the culture of a diner, let's start with just a little bit of history, because the history of diners is definitely, like I said before, a rabbit hole, but it's really, really interesting. Tell us a little history of diners, kind of where they started and why they started.
Well, as you said before, diners did in fact start in the 1870s, or at least their roots started in the 1870s up in Providence, Rhode Island, in the form of horse-drawn lunch carts. These sort of little mini restaurants on wheels.
The original food trucks.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Food trucks, you can actually go inside and eat there. They weren't serving it out of the windows, but you would actually go up and sit on a stool inside. You could hold 8 or 10 people. Diners, and what they would do is they would pull up outside of factories that were going 24 hours a day, and they would serve hot, cheap, good food to second and third shift factory workers getting on and off their shifts. And the food developed; it became very popular, and that's how they kind of got started. And then closer to the 1900s, they eventually lost the horses and put them aside, and these things lost their wheels, and they became closer to what we can know of diners as today. Bricks and mortar type places, only they're more stainless steel and glass places that grew and prospered through the first half of the 20th century. And there was one company called the Worcester Lunch Cart Company, which sort of got those first carts going that developed for many years, manufactured those sort of rail car looking diners.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with. And then there's also like I said, the stainless steel and glass ones. So there were several companies who were just manufacturing these things. What was unique is they would build these. They're like factory built restaurants. They would build them in a factory and then ship them out either by rail or by truck when highways got going and trucks became part of the picture, and plop these things down. Many times in cities, in busy areas and near factories and busy, highly populated spots, but also out on country roads. They were popping up all over the place. It was sort of the first half of the 20th century was sort of the glory days of diners, so to speak. Come 1950s, when McDonald's and Burger King and fast food started kicking in, that began the slow decline of diners at that time. But I have to say, diners are still alive and kicking, and pretty much all over the place in the Northeast anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
You go up and down, I-95. As you can see, there's plenty of diners along the roadsides there, and they're just wonderful places. I mean, they have a tradition of creating community, a sense of community. People coming to these places and dining there, and politicians like to show up these places. When they're during election times, to rub elbows with all the locals, the working class, and whatever. But it's a really kind of interesting history. There are people who have written books about all the different styles of diners and things like that. But the cuisine, you can tell it's all pretty much the same. And like I say, it's not always highfalutin, but it's good, stick to your ribs, comfort food, and there's a never-ending demand for it.
And people get so serious about their diners too.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to happen all show, Marisol, is that people are going to shout out their diners. We can go to line 1. Valentine's on there, and she wants to talk about her favorite diner.
We're having a little technology.
That's
the technology gremlins.
Well, she wanted to shout out Sandy Hook Diner, which is one of the ones I wanted to shout out as well, because it's
That's
right
your
down.
neck of the woods.
Yes, it's really close to my neck of the woods. But again, one of those perfect little diners. It's been there forever. People love it. Mike, I'm sure you've been there. The floor is actually a little bit on an angle because it's been there for so long. It's so funny.
It's kind of funky. It's a little bit off center, but that's okay. It's right on the main street there. It's a wonderful place to go. Like I said, very community oriented. Wonderful little spot.
I love that spot. I think that spot's fantastic. Now, weren't these places originally, Mike, which I think is so interesting, weren't they men-only establishments in the beginning?
Yes, they were. And what's interesting is as the business developed, they were leaving out half of the potential customer base. And what they did is they did things to try and attract women to come in. What their initial problem was that it was considered unladylike in the early 1900s for ladies to sit on stools. So some diners, the Worcester Diner Cart Company, started putting signs on the outside saying booth service. This is where some of the booths came from. When you think of the way a diner's laid out, there's a counter with stools along it. On the other side of the counter is usually a griddle or some kind of cooking devices over there. And then in back of the stools by the windows are booths. So those were initially put in to attract women in, and they also put signs on some of these Worcester diner cars saying "ladies invited." So that they eventually turned the tide, and they became culturally acceptable for people of any and all genders to come in and have a good meal.
Well, thank goodness for that. Sheesh.
No. It was a wise business move and just a smart thing to do all the way around, obviously.
Well, I do want to remind our listeners, we are live. This is our favorite time of the month where we take calls from you. So if you would like to call us and shout out your favorite diner, please do so. The number is 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. Mike, I think I sort of said tongue-in-cheek that food at diners is not necessarily, culinary excellence. But I don't think you go there to get the top shelf food. Part of the culture there is just the people and the characters. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes, that's a good point. They're really sort of every man's place, every person's place, as we'll say. You find people, a cop sitting next to a local politician, sitting next to a teacher, sitting next to a ditch digger, whatever. Everybody goes in there, and just the almost architecture of the place, the layout engenders, conversation between people who are there. And as such, it brings people from the community into a smaller community, sort of a microcosm of it. And people, they interact with people they otherwise might not normally talk to. All over again, this great comfort food, this warm, stuff, this wonderful cuisine that, satisfies the soul, satisfies its tummy.
Right.
I think our phone lines are back up. Let's see if we can
Fantastic.
get Valentine back here on the line. She's on line 1. Valentine, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here this time.
I apologize. We're
Hooray.
having some technical issues, but we've got it all fixed. We're very, very technologically advanced over here.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you're culinarily advanced, that's the important part.
I hope so. Tell us about your favorite diner.
My favorite diner is the Sandy Hook Diner, just off 84 in Sandy Hook.
Yeah.
And there you will find community.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite spots actually in Newtown. I live in Newtown, and Sandy Hook Diner, like we said before, it's so fun, so much personality in this one little building. That's the fun part about it, I think, when it comes to diners, is the personality that each one of them seems to have, Marisol.
Yeah. Mike, thoughts about
Yes.
that? It feels like you're the expert. How many diners have you seen? Been to? How many diners do we have in this fine state of ours?
Yeah, I'll talk about New England in general. I've been to dozens and dozens of diners because I wrote this diner cookbook about 6-7 years ago, and so I was covering the 6-state region. In Connecticut, I'd probably say I've been to at least 20, 25 diners, different diners, at one time or another. Some more so than others, but the diner culture and the diner population is actually still quite healthy here, I believe. There has been some concern about diners closing too rapidly, but I think there are plenty of places out there, a wide variety of places.
Well, Matt on line 2 wants to talk to us a little bit about a dish that's a diner dish, but not made here very often. Matt, we got with us? You with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
What you got for the show today?
Yeah, I want to talk about scrapple. It's a mid-Atlantic thing, and you don't really find it in the Northeast, and I want to know why. It's so delicious.
He's got a great point. Scrapple is a fantastic dish. Matt, can you just tell us really quick before we throw our 2 cents in about scrapple? What's in the best scrapple, in your opinion?
I don't even know what scrapple is made of. I think that's part of the mystery.
Well, scrapple, like he was saying, very mid-Atlantic. I think Delaware. I think Virginia. It's a great question. We don't see a lot of scrapple up here, Mike.
No, we don't. It is really, you're right. It's a mid-Atlantic dish more than anything else. It's something that our youngest of 4 kids attended Temple, and I got down and was able to belly up to a coffee shop or a diner down there and tried scrapple a couple times. Very interesting dish, I'll say. But you really don't find it up here in New England. It really is sort of a southeastern, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, that region dish that's very, very popular down there. It has all kinds of interesting things in it.
Scrapple's I grew up eating scrapple. I grew up in Virginia, so scrapple's something I definitely grew up. We also would have SOS, which is another.
What's SOS?
It's creamed chip beef on a piece of white toast, but the SOS stood for something different, something on a shingle.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Mike, I wonder if we could talk about Gold Rock Diner in West Hartford. I know it closed in August, but the diner community is, they're having to get creative as we head into year 2 of the pandemic. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I heard about the Gold Rock closing. It's one of those things, it's sort of a two-edged sword. Yes, diners, you're right, they're challenged. I mean, they're not really takeout type operations when, say, the Delta variant came back and people had to start ducking for cover again and got shy about coming in. Not the kind of cuisine that really carries very well, kind of like deep fried seafood. It's great when you have it there, but you get it home 20 minutes later and it's not quite what you want it to be. However, I have noticed, in my opinion, the diner community in Connecticut and throughout New England actually has been resilient. I mean, they've really hung in there. They, like all restaurant types, had to hunker down during the really tough part of the darkest days of the pandemic. But they've all, I think, held their own in a lot of ways. They had to cut back. A lot of diners I'm familiar with in Connecticut, Zip's Diner, for instance, up in northeastern Connecticut, in the Quiet Corner, they got almost a circus tent out in front of their place. They had the good fortune of having a large parking lot, but they were able to move their service outside, weather permitting. And others, the same thing. Orem Diner in Wilton, did the same thing. They put a big tent out front, and they had distance dining inside. So I think it's in pretty good shape. But yeah, you're right. It's not the kind of food that really carries very well, in a go bag.
Right.
Yeah, diner food's tough to go. Well, listeners, we want to hear from you about diners. Your favorite diner, your favorite food from a diner, your diner history. You want to call and shout us out? We'd love to hear it. Give us a call at 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR to join the conversation.
Welcome back to Seasoned. I'm Marisol Castro.
And I'm Chef Plum.
We're live this week, and we're talking about diners, what makes them so special, so cool, whether it's early in the morning, late at night. Mike Urban, the author of the New England Diner Cookbook, is our guest for the hour.
Yeah, we're excited to talk to him, and we want to talk to you too. So give us a call at 888-720-9677 or 888-720-WNPR to share your diner tradition or show some of your favorite diner love out there.
Give them a shout out. I'm going to use this opportunity to shout out Coffee Ann in Westport, Connecticut.
Oh.
Whoop, whoop. They only take cash.
They
They
only
do.
take cash.
They do. They've been around for 100,000 years. They only take cash.
That's so funny.
We know lots of you love O'Rourke's Diner in Middletown. It has been a Connecticut institution for 80 years. Brian O'Rourke has been cooking in the family diner since 1958. He is joining us now by phone to talk about the family business. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Oh, thanks for having me.
In full disclosure, I have to say I am a proud graduate of Wesleyan University.
Here we go.
I like to give them a shout out whenever I can. So I know your establishment quite well. I cannot always say I was lucid when I went in there, but I was always respectful and ate.
What year did you graduate?
I graduated in 96. I probably went there with the rugby team, you know.
Nice.
Yeah. So thank you for giving us memories and for filling our bellies.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Brian, we understand that in the early days, your uncle would order coffee cups by the tens of thousands because O'Rourke's was a place for all the workers in town to come get coffee. What was the diner like when you started peeling potatoes and washing dishes for your uncle in the late 50s?
I have vivid memory. I'll tell you one story about a delivery of coffee cups that came. And my uncle was, I'm not sure if the cost of the cup went from a penny to 2 pennies or what, but he had a connection who bought him 250,000 coffee cups.
Whoa.
And 250,000. And I know that because I took them off of a tractor trailer and I put them in Vic Galanto's garage down on Portland Street. And I used to go down. In those days, we probably would sell, I would say, between over 500 coffees a day to go.
Oh, my gosh.
Coffee when I started was a nickel. At night, at 8 o'clock at night, it was a dime. Until 4 o'clock in the morning when the working people started, it was a nickel again. But coffee, we lived by our coffee. We had it roasted in Hartford by a company called Supreme. The family is still around. There's a different name. It's not the same company, but it's one of the brothers. Omar is the name of that coffee up in Hartford. But coffee is a big thing, and it still is. We still serve a good cup of coffee. We're not Quakeolas, and we're not one of these fancy ones, but straightforward. We have a good cup.
I think what's a staple of a diner, one of the staples of a diner is coffee. Another staple are the regulars. And I know you have a specific culture about regulars and then regulars at O'Rourke's.
Well, the word regular, today it's nothing like it was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Today, through all the years, we become a destination place. We still have regulars, but it's not regulars like the same man that sat in the same seat every morning at 9 o'clock. And if you were sitting in that seat, we moved them so the man could sit where he belongs. You could tell what time of day it was just by looking and see who was sitting in the diner.
How cool is that?
That's funny.
I mean, that was my clock. To this day, Wesleyan used to be an all-male school.
Mm-hmm. Just like the diner, apparently.
Yeah. No, it all makes sense.
That's not true. I mean, every place was an all-male place back then, so that's a whole different show. But back in the 60s, I'll say, Wesleyan used to have buses that came down from Mount Holyoke and Smith, and it used to come in 10:17 every Friday night, every Saturday night, 10:17.
Wow.
And it went back at 3:17 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
And at 10:15, the guy next door would come over and get a coffee. And he would be walking across the street to meet the bus.
How about that?
That's the way things were back then. Today we're blessed. I mean, we have a tremendous following through Wesleyan. Is some of my biggest followings, but through our food today. I mean, food today is we're pretty passionate about what we do. And I have a good team right now, and it's running a little bit different than it has for 60 years. We're doing it with all kitchen help. We're doing it with all short order cook, myself, 2 dishwashers, and we do everything. We're still ordering online. We're still cashing out online. This is what my medical experts have guided me in. And for me right now, at this stage in my life, it's working. It's fun, and I enjoy each and every day.
And we are so fortunate that you continue to do all the work that you love and that you're still around to love it. I'm going to go out on a limb and thank you on behalf of the entire Wesleyan community, because if you're not aware of it, O'Rourke's, go for Brian's breakfast. You will be surprised. Brian, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you and your time with us here on Seasoned.
It's my pleasure. You guys are doing a great job.
Thanks,
you. Brian. We appreciate you. And, of course, we have phone calls galore right now where everyone wants to shout out their diner and talk about it. Let's go over to line 1 and talk to Marco in Groton. They're still working it out. Now we're going to line 3. All right, line 3. Chris, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm with you.
There he is.
I'll tell you what, if you knew what was happening, if you guys could see the amount, we have 475 people here at Connecticut Public that actually work in this room, and they are working feverishly to get our phone lines working properly, Chris. But the good news is that we've got you up, and that's what matters.
I was a fireman, so I appreciate good communications and also some of the problems that can be it can crop up.
That's what makes us stronger, Chris. That's what it is, right? Tell us a little bit about your...
Indeed, that which we survive. I got to tell you, I got to give a shout out to Brian. We had not only political events over at O'Rourke's, but also a fallen firefighter. They had a training chief who they did a fundraiser there, and probably more than one. They've been, along with the Wesleyan community, they've been a great supporter of the first responder community.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Big shout out to Brian. So I grew up driving down to Clearwater Beach with my mother, the youngest of 5, and she'd always stop at diners along the way to get a nap and get a bite. Even when 95 ended and 301 took us through the Okefenokee Swamp for a while there. But that's my favorite diner. Somebody referenced Scrapple and Lancaster, PA. I went to Penn State, and Ye Old College Diner and their sticky buns remain legend. Unfortunately, the diner closed, I think, in the last year, but the legend remains with sticky buns. So I'm with you on those early morning dubious mental state trips to the local diner during college, but that was mine.
Well, that's amazing. We appreciate you. Thank you for shouting them out. And those sticky buns are something I have to, I'm a big sticky bun fan. I love sticky buns.
Then go to Coffee Inn. I'm telling you.
Really?
In Westport.
They're good, huh?
They're the size of your face.
Wow.
They're so good.
Our friend Valentine, who called a little bit ago, also shouted back out to us and wanted everyone to know. Our friend Matt, who called as well, Scrapple is served at the Sandy Hook Diner. FYI.
Excuse me?
FYI. Just letting everybody know that.
Run that walk.
Let's get Mike Urban back in here. Mike, apparently we can get Scrapple here in Connecticut. How about that?
That's news to me, but I'm glad to hear it.
That's right. We want to hear more about your favorite diners and things you love about diner and diner food. Give us a call at 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR to join us on the air with our amazing phone system that we have. Speaking of that, let's take one more call. Let's go over to Marco on line 1. Marco, welcome to the show. What you got for us?
Hello, thanks for having this show in the first place.
Hey.
I never had Scrapple at the Sandy Hook Diner, but just about every summer when I was a little kid, my grandpa would take me down there. We were walking distance, and I would have an English muffin and chocolate milk. And that place
amazing.
Was really amazing. But I want to mention Ploff's Cup and Saucer up in Pawtucket, where my father's mother and father either met or hung out all the time. And then Zip's Diner, I met my birth mother for the very first time. It was sort of a halfway point. It was closer to me, but she lived up in Ipswich. But we decided that's where we would just meet up. We would each drive there, and we spent 4 hours, drinking coffee, eating an omelet, and catching up on each other's lives. And then lastly, I live in Groton. I went to grade school with the Broshus. Their dad was the Norm of Norm's Diner.
Oh.
And he started Norm's in the back of a little bar called Sportsman's Cafe, where from closing on, you couldn't drink anymore, but you could eat and drink coffee all you wanted, and it was cash only. And he just flipped burgers and made omelets and all that, and he stored up all the cash and bought that whole property, I guess.
Well, how
That's
about
the
that?
legend. I'm not sure how, if 80% of that's true or what. But then he opened Norm's Diner and Norm's Lounge, and the rest is history.
Wow. Marco, you're like a walking diner encyclopedia. We appreciate that. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. Mike, something that Marco said, which I think for me really symbolizes the diner as like the cultural institution. He started off by saying his favorite meal was an English muffin with hot chocolate with his family.
Mm-hmm.
But then he went from that to years later going there not for the food, but to meet his birth mother. In your experience with diners and the culture of diner, is this something that you see often? Is it something that is unique to diners that's not necessarily unique to, five-star restaurants or food trucks?
Well, perhaps not in the same dramatic A to Z method that Marco demonstrated there, going from birth to meeting birth mother. But I hear a lot of stories about people who reminisce about and return to places, diners that their parents took them to when they were kids, say after church on a Sunday. It was like a great tradition, Mom and Dad would take us to a place and we would, have these, wonderful meals and all this interaction and see neighbors and stuff like that. A very convivial community kind of setting. That I've heard a lot about. I've seen plenty of that. And there are in many diners, I know Brian says, and he's right, there aren't the same people sitting in the same stool all the time, but they have a real regular, steady customer base. Most of these diners, people who come in, that are just, the financial core of what keeps these things alive, it keeps them going. People just have a real, strong nostalgic sense for these things as well.
It becomes part of your family almost, It becomes something that your whole family kind of just becomes ingrained into, like, this is my diner, this is where we go,
That's right.
Yeah, it was like, but as you say, Marisol, like the 5-star restaurants, those you go to and they're wonderful, but they're, once in a while you do that kind of thing. Diners are places you go to, you just, kick back and you relax. It's comfort food. You feel comfortable there. You feel like you're, in your family's kitchen in a certain way, and everybody lets their hair down a little bit, and, you can do things, and say things you wouldn't do and say, in a more upscale environment. And there's something to be said for that. I think it's a very important part of American culture, or any culture really, have that kind of
for sure
outlet place to gather.
Well, I want to get some of Mike's favorite diners here in a second, but we've got Brendan on line 2. He's checking in with the show. Brendan, welcome to the season. What do you got for us today?
Well, Marco mentioned Norm, so I just want to touch on that a little more. I've been going there for years. I love that place. It's a real classic diner. But the six degrees of separation when it comes to diners, I was deployed overseas a few years ago and ended up at an air base in Qatar. And if you've been to Norm's, you know that they sell dark blue T-shirts with a pair of fried eggs on the front that says Norm's Diner. And there in the lounge was a woman wearing a Norm's Diner T-shirt.
What?
No way.
And I said, "You've got to be from southeastern Connecticut." And she goes, "Well, actually, I'm not." But she had come up to one of the casinos for a concert, and then after the concert, found Norm's Diner and obviously had to buy a shirt and ended up wearing it in Qatar. So
how about that?
That is very cool.
Now, just before we get you out of here, did you ever tell that story to the owners of the diner?
You know what? I haven't. I'll have to get in there and mention it to them
You
sometime.
got to. That's got to be good for a cup of coffee or something, at least. Jeez.
Yeah, at least, right?
At least.
We appreciate you, Brendan. Thank you very much. Before we get into Mike's shout-outs, too, to kind of start off the shout-outs with that, let's go to line 5 and talk to Jesse from Canton. Jesse, welcome to Season. What you got for us today? Well, we think we've lost Jesse, so we'll hopefully
we'll get that connection back.
That's right. But Mike, what are a couple of your favorite diners you like in the state?
Let me rattle off a few here. First off, Brian O'Rourke at O'Rourke's Diner, probably my favorite diner in Connecticut. I've been going there regularly, not daily, but really just an absolutely wonderful, very unique place. He does incredible things there in the kitchen, Brian himself, and it's just a phenomenal place where they have good, solid, broad diner menu, but a lot of stuff that he just comes up with on a daily basis. These really interesting things he kind of riffs on in the kitchen when he finds out what he has in his storage bins every morning when he shows up. A couple other ones in Western Connecticut that I like to mention. The Laurel Diner in Southbury, Peter Homick is the
yeah.
master of the diner griddle. He makes what many consider to be the best corned beef hash anywhere. He also, his other thing is hash browns that are incredible. Really small, nondescript, whitewashed, doesn't really look that much like a diner. Little restaurant just kind of tucked off on South Main Street, but a wonderful place. Another one, Dottie's Diner. Dory Ferry has this place in Woodbury, and it's a little bit more upscale. Has kind of this 50s retro chic kind of thing, bobby socks and poodles, whatever. But her food is phenomenal. I think she used to work up at the Mayflower in Washington.
In Washington, yeah.
Very upscale, 5-star resort and restaurants. And she bought into this diner, and she just rolls out that she's stuck with the original menu that the Phillips family had going along, and she stuck with their donuts. They have these incredible donuts there that some people think are the best donuts in New England, if not the nation.
Wow.
Not, the Dunkin' Donuts type stuff, but the real cakey kind of things, very substantial and very flavorful. Excellent meatloaf, wonderful chicken pot pies. Those are sort of the three at the top of my list. Others I'll mention out Norm's. I'm here at Old Saybrook, and Norm's is not too far away. Love Norm's. The Norm's Burger is a great thing to go there and have, and it's a great spot that's open 24 hours only on Saturday nights, probably for the party crowd, to come in and have a place to sober up before they head on home. A couple others. One I'd like to give a shout out to, the Macris Diner. This is on the Berlin Turnpike in Wethersfield, owned by a Polish woman, Eva Nowak, who sort of was pumping gas one day, and somebody said, "Hey, there's a diner for sale, down the road. Are you interested in buying it?" Just serendipitous. One of them took a look at it and bought it, and she's owned it, I think, for at least 10 years. But she does nice, good, straightforward diner food, and she has a very nice Polish platter. It has all, kielbasa and pierogies and everything else on there, stuffed cabbage, just something a little bit different from the regular diner fare.
I love all that food so
much. That's, you got Zip's Diner up in the northeast part of the state, as I mentioned, and Olympia is a gigantic, almost battleship-sized diner, also on the Berlin Turnpike down in Newington. There's a huge wide variety of these things. Sandy Hook, as you mentioned, a very different neighborhoody kind of place, and they come in all different shapes and sizes. To me, diners are defined more by their menu than by their architecture, but you can sort of guess, you can inherently feel what you expect to find on a diner menu when you go in there. The meatloaf, the great breakfast fare, waffles, omelets, all that kind of stuff. And there's plenty of stuff to choose from here in Connecticut. I would guess must be in the low hundreds, but still plenty of diners out there to explore and check out.
Man, I might leave the show early and go get some of this Polish platter. That sounds amazing. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, check it out.
Now I suddenly want waffles with whipped cream and strawberries.
Yeah.
We're going to take a short break, but don't worry, there's still so much time to call in and talk to us about your favorite greasy spoon. The number is 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. You're listening to Seasoned. We'll be right back.
Hash browns.
Welcome back to Seasoned. I'm Marisol Castro.
And I'm Chef Plum.
If you're joining us, we're live this week with local author Mike Urban, and we've been talking about diners and diner culture.
Oh, yeah. And now, when you think of diners, you don't automatically think of art. But we heard about a Hartford poet who spent years eating breakfast and writing poems in diners across the state. And we spoke with him last week on Zoom.
Brett Maddox is a Hartford poet. His poetry collection, Regent, was published in 2016. His Instagram, @DinersOfConnecticut, includes hundreds of beautiful black and white photos of breakfasts he's had alone and with friends in diners across the state. His most recent collection, Algorithm Hymns, was released early this year and is available at whichisypress.com. Brett Maddox, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So you've literally written hundreds of poems in diners all over this fine state of ours. What is it about Connecticut diners that inspires you to make art?
So at the time when I first started going to diners to write, I guess this will start the interview off on a sad note, I apologize, but my mother had died. And at the time I needed to come up with a new way to get out of the house every day, build new habits, I suppose. And so I started trying to just wake up every day and kind of set the day off right and go someplace that I had never been before and just do some writing. And so I started going to diners, and I had one friend who, to this day, I will always be grateful for. There was maybe 5 people who knew I went to diners to write poetry, and he told me that he enjoyed it and that he thought I was doing a good job and I should keep going. As always, I try to take the advice of my friends. And so there's something about making art in a place that is maybe not, if you go to a museum, there's art there. If you go to theater, there's art there. But if you go to a diner, there's nobody who really makes art. And so it was kind of nice to go to a place that is not inherently artistic and kind of use that time and use those mornings to kind of just sit and write and process emotions, I suppose.
It's interesting to me that you would, be at a diner of all places. You could sit outside and watch passersby on the street, or you could sit in your backyard, but you did it at a diner. I guess it's kind of some of the best people watching on the planet there, huh?
Right. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, you get to meet strangers, you get to meet, waitresses, you get to meet everybody who's there, and then fortunately, you get to also bring your friends along with you. So usually I go out by myself, but then after I've been doing it for a little while, people would ask me to get breakfast with them. And that was, always a great blessing in my life. So the ability to just sort of sit quietly and actually talk about life with the people that you love is a great way to spend the morning for sure.
Was it more about the people at the diner, or the stories that you would see, or the stories you would make in your head about the people? I'm just trying to figure out where that creativity flows from.
Well, it's also, I will say this, like if you go to Main Street Diner in Plainville is a good example because it's pretty small. If you go there 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, there's maybe 2 or 3 other people there. And this is true of every time, you go to all over the place. I went to every diner in the state. And so you get to see whose local diner is this, who comes every day. I would always I'm 6'6", which obviously you can't tell right now, but I'm like a big, freakishly tall man. And so I would be a stranger sort of lumbering into some of these places and just filling out his place, I would imagine. But if you are nice and if you just try to chat with people and demonstrate that, then typically they're willing to talk about life. And it also, as we were talking about before, but if you're there to make art, most people don't really like poetry, to be honest, or really think about it that much. And so to tell people that you're going around writing poetry, it adds a different element to the conversation, I would say. And people are more interested in trying to understand why you are writing poetry and what it is that you're writing poetry about, I guess.
Right.
Brett, is there a specific diner that resonates with you, or that gave you, a particular feeling or inspired you in some way, shape, or form? Because a lot of diners in Connecticut.
There are a lot of diners. Also, Connecticut is such a fairly small state, so you can get around to many of them if you have the inclination. The one that stands out most is there's a place in West Hartford, Connecticut, which is called Quaker Diner. I'm sure that y'all have been there, but it's basically like a row of benches in sort of like a brick shotgun building. Particularly the reason I like it is the way the light comes in there in the morning. When you are there bright and early, it has like a very beautiful ambiance, I suppose. And so for a long time, I would go there. I went for 10 days in a row. So I would do 10 mornings in a row with 10 different people. And we would have 10 conversations. I would write 10 poems. And then the next year I would do that again. So I probably went Quaker Diner dozens of times just to meet my friends and do some writing. So that's the place. When I think about what I will remember from having written in diners over so many years, when I die, I will think of the Quaker Diner for sure. So it's a beautiful place.
This is just a chef question. Sorry, everyone. I just have to ask. Do you order the same thing at the diner all the time, or do you get different food?
So I am a vegetarian to set that table. And so I also have a tremendous sweet tooth. So I like to eat things that are delicious, I guess. And so some places you go, and if you're feeling more savory, I would get the veggie omelet, or there's like an omelet that has tomato and feta and some green spicy leaf type thing. So I'd get one of those 2 omelets, or if I was feeling dangerous and I wanted to eat something sweet, then I would get pancakes. There's a place in Madison, I think, called Christie that makes these pancakes that are stunning, so amazing. And so often, you have like what you like to get, but then some places you go to and you're like, oh, I got to get the thing that they're really good at. Also, there's a place in Middletown called O'Rourke's that has that same thing where if you like talk to that guy, he'll make you just some random assortment of stuff if you ask him for it, and it always turns out to be quite beautiful. So,
Brett, I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing a verse with us, something that you've written while sitting at one of these diners.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. There's one that's called They Have Cake, which is, I guess, not really about diners. It's about getting older, which I imagine anyone listening can relate to. And so, yeah, this is a poem called They Have Cake. Not sure what getting older is like, but the days just keep coming. And then one day you look around and it doesn't feel any different, that somehow all this time has passed. And you're 30 and 40 and 50 and 60, and the whole time you keep thinking it'll make sense soon. And then there you are, and they have cake.
It's amazing.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Brett, thank you so much for adding your voice and experience to our celebration of Connecticut's diners. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thanks for talking about diners. It's a great thing to talk about.
That was Brett Maddox. He is a Hartford poet. His poetry collection, Regent, was published in 2016. Check him out. He waxes poetic about diners, and it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool to write poetry while you're sitting in a diner just based off what you see. I think that's amazing.
Right.
Let's take another call. We got Amy on line 5. Amy, welcome to Season. What do you have for us today?
Well, I just wanted to resurrect the memory of my favorite diner, which was in New Haven. It was called the Yankee Doodle, right next to Yale campus on Broadway.
Okay, so we're resurrecting it. Yeah, what was it about that diner you love so much?
Well, it was just a little hole in the wall, and it had all of that metallic interior. And there were only, you faced one side, you could go in, and there were only about, 10 seats or something. So everyone had to wait outside, and then you could get something that was, it was relatively cheap for students around there, and they had this terrific advertisement of on the exterior of some kind of person who was Yankee Doodle, but they got rid of it when they gentrified that area of Yale, and I couldn't believe that it went, because it should have been a historic monument because it was so cool. But I want to say one other thing, and that is, I'm originally from Minnesota. And one thing is, I used to love to go to diners for breakfast. And one thing in New England, they have this thing called home fries, which are basically fried potatoes.
Yeah.
And they're kind of orange in color. And it's kind of like the potatoes are preheated. And I have to say, I've never really been able, to really get behind home fries. But back in the Midwest, we eat hash browns, which are, where they're more like, they're,
shredded, right?
Side, they're still like raw potatoes, and the other side they're fried. I love those. And so that's one improvement I would like to see to diner breakfast.
She's starting a movement. That's what the plan is, Marisol. She's starting a movement.
Do it.
I love those as well, but I'm also a fan of home fries. I kind of like all potato. If you're going to fry a potato, I'll definitely eat it.
1,000%.
Let's go to Jason with us right now. Jason, what do you got for the show?
I'm calling from Deep River, and right in the center of town, we've got one stoplight. There's a diner called Hallie Joe's Corner Cafe. And I feel like it really makes the town. It's got tables outside right on the corner there. Just gives us kind of that Norman Rockwell feel.
Oh, I love it.
And inside, it's got those like classic brown diners booths. And your guest was just talking about pancakes, and their pancakes are great. They're like an inch thick. You can get them with banana and walnut. Fantastic.
Well, Jason, you broke up a little bit. Just say the name of that diner one more time for us, because I think it might be a really cool place to check out.
Oh, yeah. It's Hallie Joe's Corner Cafe.
Hallie Joe's.
And I started going there when my daughter was about 3 months old, and she's 4 now. And we sent them a Christmas card with her, and they put it on the wall. So it's that kind of place.
You made the Hall of Fame.
That's fantastic. Mike, let's get Mike back here on the show. Mike, isn't it cool to hear people call in and shout out all these great places? I've never heard of Hallie Joe's.
I haven't heard of it either. I know where he's talking about. It used to be something else back 20, 25 years ago when I used to haunt the streets of Deep River. But yeah, it's great because people they latch onto these places and they create these incredible memories, culinary and personal. When they go to these places, they become part of the fabric of their culinary history and their culture and what they like. they're just wonderful places in that regard.
That's great.
Mike, we asked you about your favorite diners. What's your favorite thing to order?
Oh dear.
You only get one choice. You only get one. You only get one.
Give him
Only
three.
one thing.
Give him 3.
All right, so I will go up and down. I'll tell you what, probably be the Dubliner omelet at O'Rourke's Diner.
Ooh.
And that's Brian O'Rourke has an Irish inflection on a lot of his dishes there, and so it's got it's made with Irish butter, Irish cheddar cheese, Irish bacon straddled over the top. A close second would be those that corned beef hash that I mentioned that Peter Homick makes at the Laurel Diner. That's incredible. And I got to throw in one more. You said only one. I'm going to give you 3. The meatloaf at Dottie's Diner is out of this world.
Look at that.
Man, I love a good meatloaf. And I tell you what, we asked on Instagram, on our CT Public at Instagram, we took a poll, what's some of your favorite go-to diner foods, things to order? At Memory Cell says the grilled cheese is always a go-to. At Catie, I'm going to mess this name up, Trisig says hash and eggs. Can't go wrong with that either.
Yeah.
And another one I like, Expedition Food, says a Belgian waffle with a side salad, French dressing, eggs Benedict, hot turkey sandwich, or a cheeseburger club. I thought that was one order. Apparently, I was wrong.
That was myriad orders. You can never go wrong with a turkey club.
That's right.
Or a French toast by CT Food. Run by our very own Camila Vallejo.
That's it. Mike, listen, we appreciate you so much for joining us here on the show today and giving us all of your vast knowledge of information. Mike is a contributor to Yankee Magazine and the author of the New England Diner Cookbook, the New England Seafood Markets Cookbook, and his latest book is Unique Eats and Eateries of Connecticut. Also, shout out to Brian O'Rourke and Brett Maddox. Seasoned is produced by Robyn Doyon-Aitken and Catie Talarski. Tess Terrible helped with the phones today, and Catie worked the board. I'm Chef Plum.
And I'm Marisol Castro. Thanks so much for listening. And bakers, you'll want to catch next week's show. We're talking with Valerie Lomas, author of Life is What You Bake It. Chocolate chip cookies are involved.
I
See you
love
next
chocolate
week.
chip cookies.
They're so good. See you next week.